Welcome everybody, I'm Jay Barino. I'm here with a special guest, Telenil, creator of Mass Recall, one of the creators, certainly one of the most involved in the community. And I would like to welcome Telenil here. We're going to talk about map making, we're going to talk about Mass Recall while I play some Mass Recall in the background. So again, I'd like to welcome you here if you want to tell us a little bit about yourself or about how you got involved in map making.
Thank you. Hi everyone. So I began working in Mass Recall in like mid-2011, I think. By then, Jones had released two campaigns, the Terran and the Zerg, and I began, well, I found it absolutely awesome, obviously, and then I began looking into the editor, so that I understand how the trigger works, how the AI was programmed, and then, in like November, I was contacted by an Ukrainian, Jim, who had begun working on episode 4, The Stand, and he told me he could do the terraining, place the units, but couldn't do the triggers. And I had an idea of how the triggers work because I had a look at that in the previous month. So we were like complementary. Because I didn't have the patience to terrain everything or put the units, so we could split the work, and it worked great. We had our own campaign in like a month or two, and then we worked more closely with Jones and began working on Queen of Blades together a few months later, and that was the beginning of the Mass Recall team, as we call it.
That's great. It's really interesting to see how Mass Recall's really evolved, where it started with kind of one small group of people and then just sort of branched out, and now there's so many people who have been involved, some people who aren't involved anymore but did a lot of work at the beginning, and vice versa. It's really interesting to see how that's gone, and it's cool how you talk about the terraining and how you need people who can complement each other, because like I know I specifically, one thing that really holds me up from getting involved in map making is the terrain. Like I just can't, I don't know, I can't conceptualize going from like a flat nothing terrain and making like a really interesting map, but I think I could conceptualize a really cool mission idea and do some triggering, and I helped you with some of the Mass Recall stuff, but the second I stepped into that editor, I thought, oh, I can do this, you know, I work in IT, but I opened that up, I looked at some of the triggers and had no idea what was going on. The editor just seems so complex, and I guess, like, how long did it take you? I don't know, did you work at all with the Brood War editor or the Warcraft 3 editor, and then compared to the Starcraft 2 editor, which just seems significantly more complex? A lot of people talk about the data editor as being very obnoxious to work with. I guess, what's your opinion on those things, and how can people take a small first step into that?
Well, I had taken a quick look at the editor for Warcraft 3 and Brood War. I didn't actually do map making, mostly because I didn't find anything as motivating as recreating the Brood War campaign. Though a friend of mine who did the trailer for Mass Recall did work on the Warcraft 3 editor, did pretty complex projects, and when he tried to look at the Starcraft 2 editor, he was like, I have no idea how this works. It's way too complicated. And indeed, that's one of the two, I'd say, major problems when you try to get into map making. That the editor isn't intuitive, like, at all. You have, instead of having like just a unit, you have the unit, you have the model, you have the weapons, you have an actor who puts everything together. Like, it's completely counterintuitive. Mm-hmm. So the way I did it was like, don't reinvent the wheel. I think there is an expression, a phrase like that in English, right?
Yes.
So I began by looking at Jones's maps, and instead of trying to figure how to program everything by myself, whenever I had a specific idea, like I want the AI to drop there, I opened one of Jones's maps and looked at a map where the AI already did drops and copied the triggers into my own map. So if you want to get into map making, I'd say find something that already exists and does more or less the thing you want to create, look at how it's done, and then copy-paste on your own map, changing some you know, some the units involved or the exact order of the lines. You have to do it by trial and error based on things that already were implemented by other people. I'd say.
That's really good advice. I have to say, like one good thing that I've specifically looked at is all of the Wings of Liberty and Heart of the Swarm maps are available to be opened in the editor. And like just for example, that very first Wings of Liberty mission, there's a cinematic, so it's set in cinematic mode, and then there's a dropship that comes in, it drops off Jim Raynor and some Marines. And you could go in, you can look at the triggering, how specifically they set up a cinematic with a dropship coming in and dropping units in. So if you have an idea for a map and you can terrain it, then you can go and you can copy paste that trigger almost exactly, replace the units with what you want and with locations where you want, and there you go, you have a cinematic with the dropship coming in. So I think that's really, really excellent advice. I know one thing that in the past, you haven't really directly said it, but I can tell by some comments you've made, you seem really, I would say, fed up. You seem like you don't really want to deal with AI balancing anymore. That seems like it's probably one of the biggest pains with map making.
Well, the AI in balancing was my job, more or less, in the Mass Recall team. Jones could do that, and did in several of the campaigns. But as I said, we always try to complement each other. So I've spent like hundreds of hours on AI and balancing. I liked it, obviously, otherwise I wouldn't have spent all that time testing attack waves and trying to think how much pain I could inflict on the players and in which new and devious ways I could achieve that. But it's really, really time-consuming, and that's the second major problem you have when getting into map making. However long you think the map will take, it will take longer than that. It's unbelievably time-consuming. Just a single cinematics that like was something like 3 minutes at the end of the stand took 2 days of work full time.
Wow.
Balancing the maps alone, like not including the triggering, is maybe like 8 hours, including the replay of the Brood War map. So the problem is not that I'm fed up with it, it's that I don't necessarily have the time to get into it and take the time to do something as good as I did back when we were making the new maps for Mass Recall. Because when I started working on the remake, I was unemployed. Well, I had some good perspective of being employed by a company, but it was still a few months away. So I had nothing else to do with my days, and it will like within a month, or maybe 6 weeks, I started from tinkering with the data to, well, being able to make full-fledged levels. And then it became much longer as I had more, well, a lot less time available. Well, a job basically. That's Recall.
Right.
And we still managed to do it because we had overwhelming support from the community, and like all of us were saying all the time that the community really was what made it possible. You can't have dozens of hours, spend dozens of hours on such a large project without having, well, first being really motivated, and second, have things that keep you going. But the final campaign, when Jones and I both worked full time, took us like, I don't know, maybe 6 months to complete. And we were both like, okay, this is the last one, we must keep going. We're going to do something awesome and people will be happy, which happened in the end. But yeah, we were both like, this is feeling like work sometimes.
Absolutely, yeah. The amount of detail in, especially the last, I mean, 4, 5, and 6, the one where you and Joan specifically, it seemed like had a lot of creative control over those specifically. The amount of detail that you can tell was put into those is absolutely incredible. I think everyone who's played them can be impressed. Obviously, you get some curmudgeons on the forums who always come in and have nothing but bad things to say, and That's another thing I want to bring up as someone who's, you know, on YouTube. I don't get many negative comments. I'm a pretty small channel, but, you know, you have tens of thousands of downloads on SC2 Mapster, and it's just incredible how so many people love these maps, but then there's always those people who just won't, who just can't say anything nice. Like, they play it, they enjoy it, they spend hours playing it, and then they come on, they're just like, I hate this map, how could you leave this out? How could you, you know? And it's really mind-blowing, and I can imagine it's got to be a little obnoxious sometimes for you to see that all the time.
Well, actually, I expected a lot more negativity than that. When you look at Blizzard maps or custom, I don't know, custom maps or YouTube channels, there is always a bunch of people complaining, but we had very few of them in Mass Recall. Like, I can only think about about 2-3 people who had negative things to say in like 3 years. And Mass Recall, I think, built a bit of reputation over the years.
True.
Sometimes, even people who have some critics or suggestions begin by saying your work is awesome and all that, or making their negative comments. So, it's not that bad really. I expected much worse.
That's good. Yeah. Yeah, because I see a lot of comments on every kind of map, because I've played a lot of custom campaigns specifically, and there's always people who like, they say, well, it should be this way, as if they're the ones who are taking the time to make these changes. And I think a lot of people don't realize, if you want to make a map, you should give it a shot, and you can realize how challenging it is, because I think there's like a sense of entitlement that a lot of people seem to have when it comes to playing these maps. That's why, I don't know, I try to make it a point to compliment things that I see that are really good, because you guys put so much time into these, and then just to go on and you know, trash them. But I agree, the community for Mass Recall specifically, it's like the excitement that, like, on the forums, there's like, what, 53 pages of posts on Team Liquid? Or 55, it's crazy how long the project's been going.
Yeah, like, I think, well, it will be, I think it will be 4 years it's 4 years, give or take a couple of months.
Wow. Well, it really shows. It's definitely the most detailed campaign that's available. I mean, it's 69 separate maps. That's incredible. Like, the time it takes to make one map is absurd.
Yeah, as far as terraining is concerned, we have some sort of advancement, well, a shortcut, shall I say, because there is a built-in function in the editor that allows you to convert Brood War terrain to Starcraft 2 terrain. But it's not perfect, like, the map is a little bit shorter, some of the cliffs and everything doesn't convert properly, but we don't have to open both maps and trying to recreate everything as much as we would otherwise have to. So, yeah, some of the work is done by the editor already, a bit of work. And we also don't have to design the missions per se, since Blizzard already put the mission objectives. It's like more like a port, which is partly why we managed to focus on the little details. And
I have to say, I really like a lot of the details that you've added, like a lot of your like creative edits that you've made, like a lot of the little pan-in cinematics and stuff like that. That's really what makes the mod excellent, in my opinion. Like, it could have been a straight port, and at its base it is, but you added a lot of really cool small things that, in my opinion, really makes this stand out more than what it would have been otherwise. And I just want to, I guess this isn't really a question, but I just have to say, in my opinion, that's one of my favorite parts of this whole campaign. I guess another question I had is, so you did a lot of the AI testing. Is with the AI testing in Mass Recall, since this is a mod and all of these units are technically custom units, the AI, you couldn't just box the AI base and say set campaign AI to medium, right? You had to individually program every single attack wave.
Yes. I have to say that as awesome as the Blizzard melee AI is, the campaign AI is fairly lacking. You might have realized that in Heart of the Swarm. The AI basically doesn't use any ability, like, at all. Except Psionic Storm on hard, I think. Like, the Banshees don't cloak, the AI doesn't scan. And so basically everything the AI does has to be coded. Well, not really coded because the functions already exist, but to be triggered. But in a way, that's not so bad because we can fine-tune the AI much easier. Like, I don't come and say the AI go to medium and see what happens. I can play the Brood War map, take notes like the first attack wave in this level uses Marines and Firebats. And so when I get back to my version of the map, I set the AI, start it, and send an attack wave with Marines and Firebats. And if the AI had an automated decision process making, like if it designed the attack waves on its own, then the maps wouldn't have been as close to the original as they are.
True.
What was a little frustrating is having to program like every cloak, every irradiate. And I was quite surprised that the AI in Heart of the Swarm didn't do that, because I did it like in an evening. If the AI gets attacked and one of these units, and the unit attacking it is cloaked, then scan. But Blizzard didn't implement that in Heart of the Swarm, and I don't want to sound like I'm trashing them, obviously. The campaign is a lot more polished now, there's no question about that. I just find it a bit strange, since, even I could do it.
And they didn't, yeah. I guess, so, yeah. With a trigger like that, like setting in the AI to scan, so you'd have to enable the AI to have the ability to scan, and then is it just one trigger to say if there's a cloak unit attacking to scan, or do you have to, is it more complex beyond that?
Well, the AI has, it would be just as simple as that if we had used orbital commands, but since there were no orbital commands in Voodoo, we had to use ComSat stations. So we first had to tell the AI that it had to use the ComSat stations to scan instead of orbital commands. But yeah, basically, there is something called an event when a unit gets attacked. Then there are conditions, like if the unit is an enemy unit and it is cloaked, then you scan at the position of the attacking unit. And that's it.
I see, okay. Yeah, that is interesting. You'd think Blizzard would have incorporated that, especially on like the hard and brutal difficulties. It seems like they do use some abilities, and then some they just chose not to incorporate at all, which is interesting.
They did incorporate that in their melee AI, obviously. The melee AI is excellent. It can react to what the player does, much more than our AI does. But yeah, I don't know. The campaign, didn't have that many abilities implemented.
Mm-hmm. So I guess for Mass Recall, tell us something that you think the average player playing Mass Recall, who's playing and enjoying it, wouldn't have guessed in terms of development. So like what kind of work was put into it that they would have never thought was something that you would have had to do?
Well, it's difficult to say. Obviously, we play the boudoir campaign a lot, because the point is to have the map feel as close as possible to the the original boudoir maps. Maybe let's say sometimes Jones and I have pages of discussion on some trivial topics, like what decal should we use for the UED. We have two versions of the UED decal. One that was showed on a UED flag in the cinematics, and another one that was used as a logo in their propaganda thing in the end. One of the logos was black and the other one was golden. And we both wanted a different one.
Who won?
So, well, we each wanted a different one. So in the end, we compromised by saying, like the UED fleet and special forces will have the golden one, and the ground shock troops will have the black one. And that made about like as many maps with the black decal and with the golden one, so we were both pretty happy about that. and that's how it went.
Interesting. Yeah, it seems like equally with technical installation problems, because a lot of people come on the thread to say that they have problems with installing because they don't follow the instructions. But regardless of that, it seems like another thing a lot of people like to talk about is just the lore and like really minuscule details. So it's really interesting to see that so many years, it's been what, 15, more than that, almost 20 years since the original StarCraft came out, and people still are talking about the lore and really interested. And in terms of like a sci-fi universe, it's pretty sparse. It's fairly bare bones in terms of lore, and people just love it. And Blizzard, I think, does a really good job in terms of that. And that brings us to kind of the next thing that I want to get your opinion on is Legacy of the Void. Have you watched any of the...
Yeah, I did, yeah.
What do you think?
Well, in terms of lore, my favorite race is the Protoss, so I'm hoping something awesome is coming. I've been skeptical with the Starcraft 2 lore so far. We had a lot of love story and revenge, and that was about it. But yeah, I'm looking forward to see the Golden Armada and the Protoss army, like, you know, the Protoss fighting at full strength against their enemies. Because so far in Wings and Hearts, they've been mostly around the edge, like on the edges of the battles. Like you see a few Protoss here and there, yet you roll over the Tal'Darim, but you don't really see the Protoss fleet as in the full, like the might of the Protoss army who comes and incinerate planets, you know?
Right. I think it's the campaign starts with them trying to retake Ire, which is interesting to me.
Yeah. And the Blizzard's writers specifically said they were trying to get back to this old Protoss theme of massive, advanced alien fleets that can destroy planets and like those scary aliens, powerful vessels and ships. In terms of lore, I'm really looking forward to what this might become with the StarCraft 2 improved graphics.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. I'm interested to see if they like re-implement. I think we saw some Dragoons in one of the cutscenes, so I'm kind of curious to know what their official Dragoon model is going to be.
Yeah.
Not enough minerals.
So for the Dragoon models in Mass Recall, did you just take the big gun off the Immortal? Is that how you made those?
Yeah, I'm not sure of who made that particular model, because we had quite a lot of people trying to make models for either for us or for whoever else would be interested in using custom models. But yes, the model is an Immortal whose turret was cut off and replaced by the, you know, Dragoon weapon thing. That model was, I think our Dragoon model is quite good, and we'll have to see what Blizzard model look like. There is, we've seen a Dragoon model in one of the Blizzard trailers, which didn't really look like the original Dragoons, but then again, there are plenty of different models, usually in Blizzard campaigns. We had like 4 different models for the Zergling in Heart of the Swarm. So, we'll wait and see. And those models are most definitely the thing I'm the most excited about. Like, it's pretty stupid to say, like old people, I'm looking forward to the campaign, and looking forward to the multiplayer, and I'm so looking forward to the Dragoon model. Might slip with the game, but hey.
Well, hey, with the amount of time you've put into remaking those models and incorporating them into a campaign that you've been involved with for 3 to 4 years, that's completely understandable. And I agree, I saw those Dragoon models, and yeah, they did look a little different. I think like the area around the I don't know what the weapon is called, like Psi Disruptor or something. Particle Disruptor, whatever it is, it looked like a lot more mechanical than I would have expected. But yeah, you're right. I mean, I know they completely redesigned the Zealot models to have like those giant axes and stuff like that, so I'm really interested to see what sort of other bizarre changes they're going to make.
Yeah, in Heart of the Swarm, we used several of the models to improve the campaigns, like obviously the Queen and the Devourer, because these two were made by a Blizzard employee, a Blizzard artist, who was a Brood War fan and specifically remade Brood War models when he had time to do so. But we also used the Hydralisk evolutions to make the Hunter Killers.
Oh, that's right.
Original versions of the map, the Hydralisk and the Hunter Killer had the same model, aside from one being slightly bigger. And the new models were an opportunity to make them more different. Like this Hydralisk is larger and meaner, and you can see it because he has a different model. Like his visual is different.
And that's even better than the original. That's like one of those improvements from the original game where there was no difference between Hunter Killers and Hydralisk except they were a different color. Like they were Dagoth's brood because they were red.
And they had a different portrait.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the best thing with making these models, other than the mod, I mean, other than obviously seeing people playing it and loving it, is that we could add those cutscenes and make the units move around, add doodads, and we felt like we were we were doing an HD version of Brood War.
Yeah, yeah.
We could bring the cutscenes to life in a way that the 1998 game couldn't.
That's true. There's a lot of things that were kind of implied happening in a lot of the original Brood War that they couldn't really show because they were hamstrung by the technology at the time. And I think you guys did a great job in adding a lot of those things that people expected to see, but didn't originally. And like just really small things, like at the beginning of Wasteland, you showed a little APC coming in and dropping off a couple Marines, just stuff like that. It's really really cool things like that. Maybe that was Backwater Station. I'm like playing those missions right now, so I should know. But do you think that Blizzard will give any attention to the arcade or the editor with Legacy of the Void?
I hope so. Back in BlizzCon 2013 or 12, I don't remember, one of the Blizzard guys said they would try to implement custom campaign support with Legacy of the Void. We didn't hear anything about that last November, but well, the arcade is not campaign friendly at all. You have like hard 20 maps limit, I think, from each account. And most importantly, a 200 megabytes, I think, limit. And since Mass Recall is like 800 megabytes, we need 3-4 accounts before we can upload everything on the arcade, which would make updates very complicated. So that's why we haven't been able to put it on the arcade so far, which I'd like to do, because it's the way from, well, if it's on the arcade, it will be a lot more visible, and even the players who don't really go on the forums would be able to see it.
Right away, sir. You want a piece of me, boy?
Yeah.
We'll see. Blizzard didn't really pay much attention to our remake, apparently. Well, they mentioned this a couple of times on Twitter or on the official website, but yeah, nothing substantial, so...
Yeah, I was very surprised. In general, they kind of just ignore a lot of the great content, and I think it's because they know that they can't really give you a nod because you can't put it on the arcade, which is their own fault. But if it was on the arcade, then I think maybe they'd go out of their way to mention it. So I think it's a terrible catch-22 in that sense, and it's a shame because I think there's so many more. I mean, I know that Mass Recall is like the most downloaded thing on SC2 Mapster by a huge margin. But even with that, it would be, I can imagine it being 10 to 20 times larger if there was some visibility directly through Blizzard, and I wish that they could help in some way. So maybe with Legacy of the Void we'll see that, but...
Well, you know, Blizzard made some... Well, Blizzard did awesome job with their maps, their campaigns, their BattleNet. I mean, some people don't like the new BattleNet, but I think it's pretty amazing nonetheless. I think the problem is the sheer size of Mass Recall. Like, we are one of the largest editor projects, maybe with Starcraft Universe and Starbow. And I think like the BattleNet was not designed, well, the arcade and the custom map systems was not designed with massive projects like that in mind. I think that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, the mod file itself, I think, isn't the mod file itself just too large to be uploaded? Like, it's beyond the cap just for one map.
No, I think we could upload it still. It's like 100 megabytes because we're trying everything we could to keep it small. The retro edition, though, would be too large to be uploaded on the arcade.
Right, because of all the custom models. I'm surprised that Starcraft Universe is small enough to be able to be on there.
Yeah, I don't know. These guys were in contact with Blizzard, who made some changes in the editor for their project and the like, so maybe they had some specific functions. I'm not sure exactly how they did it.
Interesting. Well, yeah, I mean, we can all hope that maybe with Legacy of the Void we'll see. I mean, I know that Blizzard is working on new projects like Overwatch, and their WoW is still their largest source of revenue. So I think a lot of people have felt that StarCraft, while important and kind of like the father of all esports in a way, other than Counter-Strike, really, it's been put on the back burner, it feels like, by the Blizzard development team. But they just need to put in just a little bit more into, I think, supporting the custom scene. And I personally think that it could be huge. It could be just fantastic. So I really look forward to it. And I guess, is there going to be a 5.3 Mass Recall update, or maybe an update with Legacy of the Void?
Yeah, we'll have a 5.3 in the coming weeks. We'll try to make it happen in 2014, so this month, in the next 2 to 3 weeks. As everyone probably knows, the big thing will be the CGI cutscene from the 20th century,
Cool.
which adds to the maps at the appropriate spots. I'll also make the easy difficulty a little easier, because we had some people complaining that the maps were too hard, even in our easiest difficulty.
Mm-hmm.
And admittedly, I never really tried to make the maps like really easy, because Jones made the original maps really hard, like this is our current hard difficulty. And I added lower difficulties over the years, but I don't really know how people who only play Starcraft 2 casually can deal with attack waves, and well, I was a little too afraid of making the map trivial, I think. So people who played Wings of Liberty on normal and completed it with no particular problem came and told me I'm getting absolutely crushed in the first 5 maps. Well, there was a problem with that, obviously. So I'm nerfing the easiest difficulty so that those people can reasonably hope to finish the campaign. So yeah, it's not fun if the 5th mission spoils you. Like, there's no point playing that.
Right. Well, it's got to be challenging to balance for a difficulty that you're not used to playing as well. I mean, you could do something like casual difficulty from the campaigns where you just half the enemy unit hit points and things like that, but even so, you never know what people can handle when they play these games.
Yeah, the reason I didn't want to nerf the hit points or the damage, that would have been really easy to do. But the whole point of Mass Recall is that you're playing with Brood War unit, basically. Brood War unit, well, with their statistics from Brood War, at least. So if you're playing against Zerglings that have 18 hit points, then that's not Brood War. Half of Brood War. You know, it doesn't sound right.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I played on hard, and I mean, I was able to complete Wings of Liberty and Heart of the Swarm on brutal, but I know it's a little sappy to say, but I think playing your campaign and playing campaigns like that Ivandel has made, and Grady is playing Subjection and Crimson Moon, and these campaigns were certainly beyond my skill level. Mass Recall on hard certainly pushed my skills to the limit, and I think over the course of the campaign it actually made me a better player. So that's personally what I like doing when I'm playing these, is I like challenging myself, and I think there's a fine line between being challenging and just god-awful. Like Omega on hard difficulty, I played that so many times, but it was so rewarding when I finished it. That was such a fantastic mission.
Yeah, the credits for the challenge in most maps goes to Jones, because he did the first 2 campaigns, and making the maps quite challenging. I'm a Diamonds player on Starcraft 2, and some maps were very challenging to me. Like, a bit frustrating at the beginning, but then I got better, and when I finished the map, I felt like that was awesome. That was, like, really felt like you were at war between the Sons of Korhorn and the Confederacy, and you really felt the enemy resisting you. And
For sure, yeah.
And so I copied that style to the the 3rd, 4th, 5th, to the campaigns I did at a later point. And I forgot what I was about to say.
I was just talking about how Omega was really hard and how I enjoy that it was well done in the sense that, and like to chain the beast, those kind of missions, they were not frustrating. A lot of times if you have to repeat missions, it gets boring and frustrating. But you guys hit the difficulty just right, so that I felt that with practice I was improving every attempt as opposed to just banging my head against the wall and getting annoyed.
The way I balanced the maps I did was I looked at the Brood War map, looking the various composition of the waves. Is it an English word?
Yes, yeah.
Try and then increased the numbers, tested the map, and then reduced the numbers until I could do things like more or less comfortably. Like if it was the beginning of the campaign, it would decrease the wave to the point I could handle them with little problem. And if it was the end of the campaign, I made sure I had to be on top of my macro, and like I made sure the waves had to get my full attention. So I did it subjectively, but then I had a good idea of how someone of my skill level could handle the map. And I made sure, as you said, that the difficulty would increase over the course of the campaign, so that the players would have to use what he learned in previous levels to beat the last ones.
Mm-hmm. I vaguely recall in the last Protos mission of the original StarCraft, you throwing in like an 8 Ultralisk attack wave that came out of nowhere.
Yeah, that was exactly the point. Like, this is the final level. Well, this was a little particular because the map is full of resources. You have 2 separate bases, and you have quite powerful heroes. Like you have Zeradul, you have a carrier, you have a battle cruiser. And if you let the player just macro calmly and mass resources, you can make a fleet of battle cruisers and wipe the map.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to keep the player occupied. And since this was the last level, I was like, well, let's just put a giant wave of Ultralisk at 12 minutes. But that will scare the player and keep him on edge.
Well, it certainly worked. That's exactly what I mean. Is just that the general concept of balancing and how you did that was just worked out just right. So you have my compliments on that for sure. It was not frustrating. It was perfect, and I never felt bored in a lot of these missions. I never felt like I could just build nothing. And again, that was playing on hard difficulty, but people can scale and you know where they feel comfortable with. So I guess
yeah,
my last. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, you were talking on things people wouldn't necessarily know about map making, and people might assume like balancing the map is copying the attack waves and tweaking it, but there is a bit more than that, because there are times where especially in the Protoss campaigns, you're facing the Zerg in like 6 missions in a row, and if you just give them the same attack waves every time, well, it'll still get a bit boring. Like, if a particular level feels like the previous one, well, it can get old. Like I've done that before.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a part of the level that's, well, not exactly design, but closer to design than just porting. In that, like, say you're facing Protos versus Protos, like in the first Protos campaign. Well, there is that unit, the river, who can destroy entire ground armies. And so, if you put more rivers in the map, the player has to play it much more carefully, like scouting ahead, trying to snipe them. If you put rivers behind walls of ground units, then it's going to be that much more difficult to get to them. And depending on the amount of units the player has at this point in the campaign, you can force different strategies. Like in the 7th mission, the only air units the player has are scouts, which are quite terrible as an air-to-ground unit. So you have to you have to deal with the rivers using ground units only. While on the 8th mission, you have carriers, which are the absolute best unit against the AI. So you have to design the 7th mission with the idea that the player will have to fight the rivers head-on. Whereas in the 8th mission, you have to assume the player is going to make carriers, because why wouldn't he?
Yeah.
So you can... So I could... like, I had to fine-tune the ground waves in Homelands, the ground mission. Whereas I could use attack waves with like 3-4 rivers and 12 zealots, because I knew the players could take it. And in Mission 7, the rivers would be your primary antagonist, the enemies you would watch carefully, try to dodge, etc. In Mission 8, they would be nuisances to be destroyed from the air. And so the main enemies would be the scouts. So I made attack waves with a bunch of scouts so that the carriers would have something to feel threatened with. Yeah, something would threaten the carriers.
It's really interesting to hear you explain this in that way, because these are all things that as I played the campaigns, I noticed, but it's really cool to hear your reasoning behind that and the amount of effort and thought you put into making them, because it all seems really important to have that kind of stuff. And yeah, like Mission 8, even though it was the first mission I could make those big banana carriers, was certainly one of the hardest in that whole campaign. So the thought that you put in saying, well, I know that the player can do well this map because they have carriers, and carriers are too good against the AI, so you just made the attack waves severely challenging, really made that...
Exactly.
Yeah, made it engaging to play and not just boring.
And speaking of that, there is something people who want to make single-player campaigns should know, is that sometimes people tend to give you the full tech tree.
Alright, we're back. Sorry about that. We had some internet issues, but we're back now. You were just talking about how some mapmakers might give you the full tech tree.
Yeah, it's tempting to give the player a full tech tree and have the AI send whatever unit you want it to send. But actually, I would argue that in order to make levels that feel more unique and more different from each other, you should restrict the tech tree at the beginning of the campaign, because, well, let's face it, if you give the player a full tech tree and a large enemy base to destroy, it usually ends in a battle cruiser fest, or whatever for the race is.
Yep.
And the player might choose not to do that, but it's usually the safest option. And, like, by now everyone knows that if the AI sends like 2 or 3 colossi, you have to use Vikings to destroy them. That's like the basic Starcraft 2 counter. But if you make a Protoss enemy send colossi at the player and he doesn't have any air unit to counter them, then it becomes a lot more tactical. Like the player has to think of what units to use against a Colossus. Maybe he'll make siege tanks to destroy them from afar. Maybe he'll use marauders to snipe them. And then you can put zealots in front of the Colossi if you want to be mean, or stuff like that.
Right.
And the Brood War campaigns were quite good in that way, because from level to level I could I could design the attack wave to be more heavy on the ground or on the air, so that the player had to use different tactics to beat the waves at each level. Like in the first Terran campaigns, you have some heavy siege tank battles between the Confederacy and the Sons of Horholth. The Confederates attack with like 5 tanks or 6 tanks per wave. And if you don't have battle cruisers to beat them, then it's becoming a lot more challenging. You have to crawl with your tanks, build bunkers, maybe a couple of raids to destroy the tanks from the air. And then by the 10th mission you have battle cruisers, and as I said about the Protos campaign, you don't care about siege tanks anymore once you have your battle cruisers. So the level unfolds in a completely different way, even though the AI is still using the usual tactics, like mass siege tanks or mass mutalisks. And even though I tried to give a certain like recurring waves to the AI so that you would recognize the way the AI fights. Like the Zerg are probably going to send a huge cloud of mutalisks because that's how the Zerg do. But depending on the tech tree you have to defend yourself, then that could play in very different ways.
Yeah, and it makes every mission different. It's not. Well, I'm just kind of reiterating what you just said, I guess. But yeah, that's seems really important, and it keeps every mission fresh, so that it's not just lame. It's not boring. You don't want to be doing the same thing every mission. So yeah, I agree. I mean, I played the Enslavers remakes, and I give every credit to the Mapmaker there. I think he did a great job in remaking them exactly as they were, and I think the problem was with the Enslavers maps in their original form, in that you go in and you just have battle cruisers, and they're just giant, kill everything over the course of an hour and a half, and you do the first one, and you're like, I don't want to do that again for the next 5 missions.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. If Enslavers maps had, say, no battle cruisers until the final mission, then they would feel more interesting, because you would have to use siege tanks with air support maybe, and slowly clean the maps. Then you would have to make the attack waves weaker, of course, because if you don't have battle cruisers, then you can take the same amount of heat as if you have to crawl forward with siege tanks, obviously.
Yeah, and as someone who's recording, for other people to watch, I feel bad when I just, like, for several missions in a row, I'm like, oh, I'll just make mass carriers because it's the only way I can win this mission, because otherwise the AI is so ridiculous and rebuilds so fast, I just can't do it. And then by the 3rd time, I'm, like, apologizing to my viewers. I'm like, sorry, here's another hour and a half of carriers.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly something I've tried to avoid in Mass Recall. Even when the players is inevitably going to make carriers, as you've said before, I'm making some specific attack waves so that he has to build defenses, or in one of the missions I send a giant wave of scouts at the player so that if he goes straight for carriers he's going to be destroyed, because he can't possibly have enough air forces to beat the scouts if he went straight for carriers. So yeah, the original map could be defeated with carriers, so I kept that, but the whole point was that the players wouldn't just sit there and take to carriers.
Yeah, this is all really good points in terms of map making, and I think, again, I wanted to do this interview, one, because I thought it'd be great to talk with you, because we've been in contact for several months now, but also because I know not that many people watch these videos, but my channel's slowly been growing, and if anything, I want to get people into map making. The scene could be bigger, and I think getting over the initial hump of the editor would really would be a huge boon for the community. Obviously, the arcade is something that's out of our control, but if we could just get people to kind of dip their toe in the water and give it a shot, and hearing from you a lot of the interesting thoughts, like the behind-the-scenes thoughts that you have when it comes to balancing AI and, you know, importing the old Starcraft maps, or, you know, copy-pasting triggers. These are all really important things that can help people get started, so I really appreciate you coming on and sharing these thoughts with us, because coming from me, I'm not a map maker. I could say these things, but it's all speculation. I really have no real idea.
I can't speak much about terraining, because I've never done any terraining at all, apart from fixing a small patch of ground here and there. There is something about map making as well. It's very easy to do a map that's either trivial or horrendously difficult. Yeah, the happy medium takes a lot of testing to find. You have to test your map over and over and over. Like, there is no way around it. You have to test it several times and fix every bug you'll find as you find them. You can't hope to do a map, even if you know what you're doing. You can just hope to go straight on a map, roll the triggers, and hope everything will work fine. It never does. I hope I'm not scaring people. It's just that you have to know that, otherwise you're going to be to feel frustrated that your work isn't going fast enough and you're going to drop it. Like, don't try to do something awesome, just try to do something good and stick to it. Like, yeah, take your time. There are things you can't think of everything, so you will have I don't know, I guess you'll just see as you go, but yeah, I think I'm just confusing myself at this point.
No, that makes absolute sense, and I mean, what that really implies is, you know, start small, and as you do it more consistently, you learn more, and then you get better, you get faster, and then you can start doing more complex things. And you kind of see that evolution in the Mass Recall project. It started, you know, with just the first campaign, and as more people got involved, and and learned more about the editor, you can see things being added, very large degree of things that just make them better. So that's why I think it's excellent advice overall.
And rule number one really is, don't try to reinvent the wheel. Just look at, if you're starting in map making or even in a Starcraft 2 editor, because it's probably more complicated than any other editor you've used before, just look at maps that already exist and take the functions you need from there. Like, it's the only way you can do something in a reasonable amount of time. And since people have sweat for hours on the editor, well, just use the work. Like, they did the job. They spent their time and developed all these AI things or these functions. Yeah, no point of you doing that all over again. Your own map will be unique enough so that you can pick the bricks you need here and there.
So copy paste is your friend.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I guess I really appreciate you taking the time to come and talk to me today. I think there's a lot of useful and interesting things to get people started. And I guess unless you have any final words here, if any last advice or.
Well, there is something I wanted to say at the beginning of the interview, which I forgot to. I wanted to detail what each of us is doing on Mass Recall.
Sure.
As I said, we try to complement each other. So yeah, I don't know if you will want to edit it and put it back when we were talking about that, but either way. So there are 3 of us who did most of the work on the campaign, and some people who give us a hand here and there or make models, etc. But as we stand currently, there is Jim, who's from Ukraine, who's extracting the Brood War files from the maps. Like, we need the sounds to make the briefing room, so he extracts them from the original MPQ files. he converts the terrain from the Brood War maps and places all the different units. He does some basic terraining, doodads, etc. Then he sends the maps to me, and I do most of the triggering, like I do the briefing, I implement the mission objectives, I balance the AI, I make the various difficulty levels. And then once the map is playable and is, well, more or less a simple Brood War port at this point, I send the map to Jones, and then he does the advanced terraining, the cutscenes, the pan over. He does advanced terraining with like infested doodads and Zerg corruption everywhere, or Protos buildings if we're on Aya, you know, all that sort of little details and production value. And it's not completely like hermetically sealed. We all do a bit of everything. Like Jones can do attack waves if he wants to do so. I can do some cutscenes, but usually this is how it goes. Like Jim converts the maps from Brood War to Starcraft 2. I make the maps playable, and Jones had all the little details and cutscenes and camera moves.
Cool. You can kind of see like the progression line of maps and how that all went. That's really interesting to learn about.
This is Jimmy.
And we also have Gradius, who made Subjection, and who's from the Starcraft Legacy website, who's helping us with the mods. Like if there is a bug with an ability, then sometimes he steps in and fixes it. He's also the one who made the portraits move their lips during the briefings.
Anytime you're ready.
Which is harder than it seems, I think. Isn't that?
Yeah. Yeah, basically in StarCraft 2, the characters actually mouth the words they are saying. Like they speak when the sound, the actors say their lines in the microphone, and then whoever is in charge of the portraits made it so that the movements of the lips would match. You know,
This should be good.
whenever the actor stops talking, then the character's lips don't move anymore. That's fairly impressive once you see it, but it means that there are no generic animations for the portraits.
Trainer here.
We can't do the synchronizing ourselves. Like it's way too complicated and too precise, and none of us is a sound engineer or model engineer or whatever
This is Jimmy.
the person is called.
Mm-hmm.
So instead, Gradius had to work around that. I think the way he did it was he took one of these lips animations from StarCraft 2 and programmed something that allowed it to last for as long as the sound file does. So every time there is a sound file that is played, well, you have that specific bit of animation that plays on the portrait, and whenever the sound file ends, then the animation stops. That's right.
Interesting.
And so it's not so bad really, because even if it's not as well, it doesn't sound as natural as in StarCraft 2, but then again, in the original Brood War, the portraits also had the same talking animation all the time. So we didn't do it intentionally, but even our portraits behave in more or less the same way than the Brood War portraits did back in the days.
When I first saw it, I actually thought the same thing. I'm like, I'm not sure if this was intentional or not, but it kind of kept the same charm that the original maps had, because yeah, there was no actual like lip to word movement in the original game. Very cool.
Go ahead, Commander.
Well, all right. I think that should wrap this up. Unless again, there's anything else you want to talk about. But again, I really appreciate you coming and talking. It really shared a lot of interesting sides to map making and to Mass Recall in general. And I look forward to 5.3. And now that I'm playing through Rebel Yell right now as we've been doing this interview, and it makes me want to go back and just play it all again. Yeah. So I might go do that.
Yep, we'll have 5.3 this month, and then once Legacy of the Void is out, we'll start working on 6.0 with the new Legacy models. And I know for a fact that it won't take us the year it took us after Heart of the Swarm to publish the new version, because after Heart of the Swarm we had a year to go back to the episodes 1, 2, 3, update them with the latest functions and everything we've learned while making 4, 5, and 6.
Add-on complete.
We had plenty of functions to add, etc. But yeah, I don't think we'll do any major overhaul with Legacy of the Void, but we'll certainly improve the map and models with the models, the doodads, etc. And then I guess we'll just keep an eye on it, fix whatever bug happens, whatever bug crops up, and yeah, and we'll just hope everyone will keep enjoying the remake for the years to come.
Great. Well, again, thanks again, and anybody who's watching this, if you haven't downloaded Mass Recall, I highly recommend it. I'll put the link in the description, or check out my playthrough, but first and foremost, go download it if you like the original StarCraft, or if you've only played 2 and you're interested to get back into the original. This is certainly the most polished, nearly bug-free way to play it, so head over to SC2 Mapster, follow the link, and thank you everybody, and thanks again, Telenil.
Thank you.
Bye now.